Hi everyone, today let's talk about ASML earnings. Do me a quick favor and like and subscribe and watch the video till the end to help out the channel, and let's get started. So ASML did report earnings and they were lower pretty significantly, and they manufacture the equipment that makes semiconductors, and that pulled down the entire semiconductor space. You can see bookings were down 61%, and on the back of that, AMD fell 6%, NVDA down over 3%, Intel fell 2%, they've already been in the dumpster fire, Qualcomm down 2%, and the biggest drop was from ARM down 12%. So ASML dragging down the entire semi space. And if semis are falling, they have been the bellwether here recently. If anything was going to rally, it's going to be semis. And now they are moving down pretty significantly. Moving over to fear and greed, we did dip down a little bit to 35. You can see on the timeline here, we've dipped down pretty much straight for a while now. Getting into that zone where we start to see bounces between that 20 and 25 zone. Not there yet at 34, 35. So a couple of points lower, maybe a couple of days lower still, but then we're going to get into extreme fear and then we'll see what happens from there. And you can see a month ago we were at 74, so it's been strong move down, momentum in neutral, strength and breadth in fear, put call ratio, extreme fear, volatility, extreme fear, and then safe haven demand, extreme fear, and then junk bond demand finally seeing a little bit of a tick up. It's been in extreme greed, but now it's just in regular greed. Moving over to seasonality, this chart is not really being very helpful here. You can see we're supposed to have bottomed already. We've had 2 days of movement down, really 3 days since the 15th to the 17th when this was supposed to be a slightly bullish period. So we'll see how this plays out. Maybe this is shifting over to today or tomorrow, and then we get bullishness the rest of the month, but this is supposed to be a bullish period, and that is not what we are seeing. Moving over to earnings, you can see ASML there missing on the top line, still beat on the bottom line, but I think it was the forward guide that really pulled things down. US Bancorp beating on the top and bottom lines, Abbott Labs beating on the top and bottom, and then looking at tomorrow after hours, you have Netflix that's going to push around markets, massive company there at $265 billion. You also have Blackstone, American Airlines, always fun to watch. And then looking at the Friday, you do have Procter & Gamble, American Express, definitely interesting. SLB, an oil company, they should be doing quite well. And that'll wrap it up for the week. Moving over to the economic calendar, CPI coming in line with expectations. It seems like they're a little bit better at being on the money than we are. 20-year bond auction came in at 4.8. That is pretty high. We'll see what the yields look like on the charts later. Then looking at tomorrow, Philly Fed manufacturing here at 8:30. Existing home sales at 10 o'clock. Month over month and for March. Really want to see those come in pretty strong. Give markets a little bit of positive news, and then you got Fed balance sheet here at the end of the day. Moving over to Max Payne, you can see we dipped all the way down to that 500 area. That is the big put wall here. Right now, I still think that that is going to hold. So we should see a little bit of sideways choppy price action in tomorrow's session and potentially even into the Friday. Doesn't mean we couldn't test some lower lows, but right here, that is a massive put wall. I just can't imagine we're going to close below that level. I've seen it before where we did close below it. Big put walls like this in really bearish conditions. I just don't think that that's going to happen. Certainly possible, anything is possible, but keep that in mind. Moving over to the charts, starting off with the S&Ps, you can see it did fall here today, 0.58. Tried to make a feeble attempt, tested yesterday's highs, and then sold off pretty strong. 3 candles in a row on the hourly chart, testing that 500 level. Ended up holding there. If it's going to hold, it really needs to do it at the 500 level, big psychological level. There's really nothing here on the volume profile that says that this zone is going to hold. I really think this trend line down here is going to matter more. Let's go ahead and extend that out. So we have some trend support in here around 493.50. We'll see how that zone plays. But right now it still looks like there's about another 1.5% of downside potential. Moving over to the Tasty charts, starting with the SPY, you can see we hit that lower ATR band. That was at 534 cents. Touched that level, got a little bit of a bounce. Still got that 89 EMA sitting down there at 495.82. Certainly could touch that. Might overthrow here a little bit. Momentum, definitely bearish on the volume weighted MACD. And then looking at the 4-hour chart, you can see we are just riding that lower ATR band. Not overthrowing, just grinding in a downtrend. Hit that 8 EMA and then sold off, so that's your resistance. That's at 503.22. Momentum did find a little bit of strength, but not much. And then looking at the hourly chart, it actually looks a little bit better here. We didn't quite touch that lower ATR band, and then we got to pull back in time. Lower ATR there is at 498.46, so that could be an area of support. Got the 8 EMA there at 501.56, but again, you can see all the EMAs and SMAs stacked in line. Definitely a bearish trend, but we could see maybe a short-term bounce, just like I talked about yesterday. Moving over to the NASDAQ, very similar thesis, down 1.22%. Big breakdown on the day. Tried to get up here and test that 433.24 level. level. You can see again, testing yesterday's highs, same area, broke down massive, took out 428.50, and then down here at 424.75. Potential area of support didn't quite touch it, so that's a slight bullish indicator. And you can see this previous bottom in here at 421.92. Big move higher, tested that zone and then rallied up. Certainly possible that we find some support in there, but this is still very much a downtrend. Momentum bearish, RSI bearish, not oversold yet. And it seems like there's more downside to come. And then moving over to the Tasty charts, you can see we got a bearish reversal of conditions here on the daily chart. That's the first one. You can see that ATR stop up there now. That is sitting at 450.28. Momentum definitely bearish. Got the 89 EMA sitting right there at that 424.41 level. Interesting zone, lower ATR band 422.24. So that seems like a zone where we're going to find a little bit of support. That would give you another $1 to potentially $3 lower from current price. A little bit less than 1%. Maybe that's an opportunity. Certainly could see a little bit of a bottoming in there, but you're still in bearish conditions now. And looking at the 4-hour looks basically like the SPY grinding along that lower ATR. That is at 425.67. You can see these ATR bands bending to the downside. Does not look great. And you can see some strong volume coming through on that down move. Momentum still definitely bearish. And then looking at the hourly chart, looks a little bit more bearish. Hit that lower ATR, bounced a little bit. Lower ATR now at 425.42. Again, ATR stops sitting there at 431.85. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow, you can see the Russell was down 1.06%. That is 2 bearish days in a row. It was down 0.37 yesterday, and you can see this just continues to look terrible. 200 SMA sitting down there at 189.50, just above my 189 level. Certainly could find some support at 191.83. Definitely interesting there as well. Momentum RSI still definitely bearish. And then looking at the Dow here, actually not too bearish. So it was falling before everything else, and it fell more early in the move down. But now it's kind of hovering in here at this 376.35 level, and you can see momentum on the daily chart actually stepping towards bullish a little bit. Definitely some support coming in at that traded zone, some volume in here. And we'll see what happens on the Dow. Again, it still looks terrible, but finding a little bit of support. Moving over to stocks that were moving here today, we got Trump Media actually catching a bit of a bounce, 15.59%. Momentum rolling to the bull side, volume coming through, RSI stepping higher, 200 SMA acting as support. Seems like Trump Media might have found at least a short-term bounce. Again, this is still a very expensive company. Basically no fundamentals supporting any kind of real price, but doesn't mean you can't trade it to the upside. Caught a bit of a bid there, $3.50 to the upside. And then looking at Pepsi. So Pepsi is one of those places where you can park your money right now. It was up on a dumpster fire day like today at 1.18%. You can see it's been holding this range for a while, right in this 166 to 169, 170 area. And it does seem to have found a solid base. So you had a bottom here in October. It's not running to the upside or anything crazy, but it does seem like there's a solid base, solid volume coming through, and we're holding a higher low. Seems like this could be finding some room to the upside. Actually really does look like a good setup there. I do want to highlight, you can see the RSI just barely crossing above that SMA. So that's giving you a little bit of a bullish take as well. Pepsi looking like an opportunity here over the coming months. Moving over to the Mag 7. The Mag 7 dumped here today, 1.89% to the downside. Momentum and RSI definitely bearish. We did break down that level at 349.21. We didn't talk about it yesterday because it barely moved, up 0.26, still holding the level. But here we broke down, closed below it, tested that 55 EMA. Now this is a critical zone, right? So that 55 needs to hold. We need to bounce from that level. But at this point, you wouldn't expect it to. We consolidated. We couldn't make any higher highs. There was room up here on this trend, couldn't make it happen, and now we're selling off. So you would expect this to have a bigger downtrend in my opinion. And if that happens, obviously markets are going to go with it. Moving over to Apple and Tesla. Apple having another bad day, 0.81. We're right at that support level again. So it needs to hold there if it's going to do it. It's done it a few times here. It certainly doesn't look good though. Definitely down. Trend is still very much a downtrend. 165.71 would be your next support. If that level breaks, which is your low from back here in October, if that breaks, there's lots of downside potential in my opinion. And then moving over here to Tesla, down 1% or so. Still holding that low from yesterday. You can see it on that gap down. We were looking for maybe a gap up. If we did get a gap up, that could be a confirmation of some more bullishness, but momentum rolling to the downside. RSI looks bearish. And these two have looked bearish for a while, and they continue to do so. Moving over to Amazon and NVIDIA, these have been the two that I've been watching for a while. They've been very important. Amazon has continued to make higher highs when everything else had pretty much stalled. Now we got 4 days of downside in a row. closed below the 181.41 level, selling off after hours. 55 EMA sitting at 175.64. That is your next area of support in my opinion. So Amazon rolling to the downside, and then NVIDIA selling off with the ASML earnings announcement that we talked about. Trend is still there, 182, 829.77. That zone needs to hold. 55 EMA down there at 818.60. Momentum and RSI definitely bearish. Seems like a bit of a topping pattern. It's been a massive run. And if this structurally starts to break down, I do think it's going to take markets with it. Moving over to staples and discretionary. Staples catching a little bit of a bid, 0.37 to the upside. Momentum rolling to bullish. Seems like a place that is a little bit better to be than the rest of markets right now. It's had a down move for sure. It was all the way up at 76.50 and now we're down at 73, so definitely finding a little bit of downside, but it seems like there might be a bid in here right in this zone. You can see we're testing the highs back here from January, need this zone to hold, and then looking at discretionaries, down 0.49, touched that 144 EMA at 171.80. That level did catch a little bit of a bounce, but it's down after hours, 200 just below at 171.34. And then I have a level there at 170.68. If that breaks down, this is going to be significant. You can see this previous low at that level, critical zone, momentum and RSI definitely bearish. Next volume would be just before that 166.78 area, and that would be about $6 lower. Moving over to transports and financials, we talked about these yesterday. Transports continues to look like a dumpster fire. 144 and 200 SMA sitting down in that 63 to 64 area. Probably not going to find support before that. Momentum and RSI bearish, and you can see volume ramping up as this continues to go lower. And then financials, we talked about it yesterday. It's been doing badly on the back of earnings, but we caught a little bit of a bid, 0.25 at that 39.70 level, technically below it. If that structurally breaks, it could go even lower. But look at momentum, finding a little bit of a bid there. Certainly interesting. It's been a massive run. We talked about it. And this is definitely a down move, but where is it going to finish up? Are we going to break this level and then push to that 38.30 area? Maybe some high volume in here, 38.77. But right now, this does seem to be finding a little bit of support. Moving over to breadth. So breadth did make a slightly lower low on the 20-day breadth. Got all the way down to 5.96. Didn't get to that 4.5 level, but this is extended for sure. And then looking at 50-day, we did touch the next level at 26.39. Momentum and RSI still bearish, but looking at momentum here on the 20-day, finding a little bit of a base, could see one of those kind of upswings. This is a zone where you could find support on the 50-day. 26 is an interesting level. We talked about it yesterday. We didn't quite get there. Thought we would today, and we did. 22, I think, is still in play, but between the 20, finding a little bit of a bounce on that 7.75 level, and then looking at the 50-day, touching a critical zone, it's not impossible that we start to see a little bit of a bounce on these, either at the end of this week or early next week. Moving over to 200-day breadth and the put call ratio. These have been interesting over the last 2 days. We're going to talk about it one more time. You can see 200-day breadth catching a little bit of a bid. How about that? 64.75, interesting level. Let's go ahead and extend this out. I think this might be relevant here. Not quite. So not quite there yet, but definitely holding that 64.75 level. If this starts to rally a little bit, we talked about the breadth on the other ones coming a little bit better. Momentum rolling to bullish here. Definitely interesting. And then on the put call ratio, I just want to highlight how high we did get here today on the put call. Closed at 1.28. That is pretty high. We didn't touch that 1.4 level. That's usually what you want to see. That's the first zone. If we get anywhere near 2, you're probably done with the move. Probably should put another one here at about 1.6. Let's go ahead and do that right at the top of these wicks. That's an interesting area. 1.63, but 1.4 is kind of your first one. 1.6, definitely interesting. And then if you get up to 2, that is just about the top of the put call ratio. You can see we hit it here in December of 22, and that's a good indicator of when this down move is probably going to be done. Moving over to yields, they actually took a little bit of a breather here today, down a little bit on both of them. 10-year still hovering at 4.5, 4.6. We talked about the 20-year note auction came in at 4.8, so that's still decent, sitting up there. Not above 5 yet, and then you have the 2-year still sitting very close to 5. So the yield curve is still quite flat. It's not in normalized conditions yet. Still waiting for that. This is the longest inversion in history, and so far we're still inverted, and we saw a slight down move here today. Moving over to the dollar did reject off of that trend line. So we talked about it. That was the price target. Touched it yesterday. Rejected from it here today. Down quite a bit, 0.43. Momentum rolling over. RSI breaking down. Hourly RSI not quite oversold. Probably going to hit that 144 at least. Sitting at 105.67. And then you got the next level of support at 105.5. We'll see how that plays. So right now, short-term downtrend, still a medium-term bull trend here on the dollar. Moving over to bonds, you can see the bonds did catch a little bit of a bounce. JNK 0.13 coming off of that 200. Again, zone of support, interesting level 92.50. If this catches a little bit of a bounce, we could see a short-term bounce in equities as well. TLT similarly, gap down, gap up, rally back above 89.16. Interesting there, momentum rolling to bullish, volume coming in. Critical zone right there. If this holds and starts to rally, that would be a significant low, higher low setup, but we still need this to change structure. We still have a low, lower low, high, lower high. So still very much a downtrend, and it did break down pretty significantly. The question is, will this kind of bottom out, maybe consolidate and break higher? Right now, this is still a waiting game. Moving over to volatility, bond volatility fell back to the 200. Momentum fading there, pretty interesting. VIX, on the other hand, fell just slightly, 18.2. So it's still elevated right in that 18.5 area. Think this is probably going to hold and push higher at least one more time, but momentum faded a little bit. Nothing super convincing. Still very much a bull trend on volatility. Moving over to my accounts, you can see I was down just a little bit, $138 or so. I did establish a position here on the IWM. I ended up going out to the Monday. Wanted to be a little bit conservative, down at 192 for $1.50, so trying to get into it a little bit lower. Being patient there. I actually sold a 193 here today and then rolled it out to the Monday, so that's why there's a little bit of a loss on that account, but still being patient. I think 150 is a decent credit. Puts me in the stock around 190.50, so decent entry point, and I can continue to roll that out if I need to. And then looking at the Qs, still playing very conservative. I have my two puts here rolled out in time, one for Friday and one for Thursday for $1.50 and $2.65, so still pretty protected. And then I actually added another set of calls here, 14 days out at 440 for $2 credit, continuing to give myself a little bit more protection to the downside. This is generally my defensive position, and so far it's working out well. You can see both of these were down more than 1%, and I was only down about 0.1. Let me know down in the comments section what you think of ASML or the semiconductor space as a whole. Is the magic rally done, or is this just a shorter term pullback in a longer term bull trend? Definitely like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video, and make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.